Well, thanks for having me. I'm Malitta Seamon, and I am a lot of things, but mostly I am a wife, a mother, an entrepreneur, a former CEO. I have a lot of titles that come behind that. Mostly what I'm doing today is leading Inbound Leadership, which is an organization to inspire individuals to live more authentically, but mostly lead authentically. So my goal is to help individuals have a safe space to admit the things that we all live inside. Sometimes the fears, the insecurities, the uncertainties, life just moves pretty quickly. And so providing a space where these leaders can uh, communicate what's going on inside so they can better express what they're doing externally. So that's inbound leadership. I also just recently wrote a book, Mindset Freedom, with my husband, and it's being released on May 17th. We're very excited about that. But Mindset Freedom tells about our journey of having to go inside to live better externally. We ran the business together for about 2 decades. And in that time, we amassed a lot. I mean, we had a lot of success in terms of developing wealth, but our health, the health of our relationship, and our joy were not part of the factor of the equation. And so, what we had to do was to take a step back, and the catalyst for that really was when my husband decided to leave the business and leave me in it. And that was quite a surprise and a shock. And it threw our marriage into turbulence. It threw our business into turmoil. And we had to really fight to survive through that. And even today, we still continue to learn about each other. We did survive it. But we grow day to day, understanding that there's a lot that we both were living with inside that we didn't understand. When we got married, there was a lot we didn't understand about each other because we didn't even understand ourselves. What we learned to do was to comply with what the world told us should be and how it should be. And we checked all the boxes. And to everyone else, we looked like the perfect couple, when in fact, we were both pretty miserable. And so, from the experience of having him walk out on me, would I say really it was the best thing that ever happened to me personally. It didn't feel that way at the time. I could have killed him. We went through a lot to survive it, but in the end, I definitely landed in a better place for myself, and that was with myself, being myself, understanding myself better. So that's kind of the Melita in a nutshell. I'm trying to narrow that down to about 2 minutes. That's who I would say I am.
That's a compelling story. I know in the bio that I read when we were setting up the interview, the concept of being in the business with your husband and then him leaving really caught me. It was shocking to me. And then I was really rooting just in the next few paragraphs of your bio that you would be together still as a husband and wife, business aside. Now, that business has nothing to do directly with what you're doing now business wise, right? I mean, obviously in your personal development, but that was not related to the inbound leadership.
That's correct. The business we were in conference and event management services, something neither of us studied for, knew anything about, but it was a pathway for us to create a lifestyle that we wanted. And so I would say we pretended to love it, but what we really loved was the money that it generated, the fact that it gave us security. But in terms of any other fulfillment, it just wasn't there. So after Brad left the business, I continued the business for about 3 or so years without him. And I'm kind of foreshadowing the book, but he eventually returned to the business, and together we decided to abandon it. It was not what we wanted. And that was a very difficult decision because our life, our home, everything was built around it for over 2 decades. What we were able to do after that was to pivot more into what was more authentic for us, what felt right for us. And that happened naturally. It's funny how life works that way. Once we released, things started to appear. We were asked to do coaching. We were, being called upon to help other businesses, and so it was kind of a natural evolution. So we were, I would say we were blessed in that regard, but I would say that we were deliberate and being true to ourselves, and that life came to us that way.
Very astute for you to see that and adjust approach. As you say, pivot. I had an interview just yesterday with another businessman, and he talked about the concept of pivoting. So it becomes kind of a theme as weeks go by when you start seeing the same concepts come up over and over again. As I do an interview, I have phrases that stick in my mind that I like to come back to, and I hope that doesn't throw you because one of the phrases you mentioned earlier on was checking the boxes. And it goes to what we just said with pivoting. Can you expand a little bit more on what that meant for you before you realized what that really was, as it came to mind that that's what you had been doing in the past, and how you made the change, how you not uncheck the boxes, but how that became less of who you were and you moved into more, maybe would self-fulfillment be the right word?
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah, that's definitely the right word. So, I came up and I was raised in a very traditional family. We were all expected to, you know, uh, go through school, graduate from college, get a good job, get on our feet. And that's all I thought about, get married, have children, and so I went through the motions without ever asking myself, is this really what I want? Am I happy? Do I feel comfortable with what I'm doing? And I continued that right through my marriage with Brad, right through building the business, until our crises hit. And what I realized looking back was all of those micro contortions were developing, they were creating unhappiness and resentments within me. But I couldn't put my finger on it. And I watched so many people talk about, I want to be happy. And I was one that would always say, life just isn't happy. Life just isn't designed to be happy, when in fact, we betray ourselves so many times and even coming close to being able to achieve it because we're so busy marching down the path that we think we're supposed to go down. And really, when Brad left the business, there was a point when I said, why am I doing this? Why on earth am I continuing this business when I'm unhappy? It's creating havoc in my life. And then the box was, well, how do I get out of it? I've created this reputation. I have this title. I have expectations. How do I just turn around and walk away from this? But again, it was the best decision I made. It was the hardest decision, but it was the best decision I made. And I laugh even with children. I watch parents and we start talking about, what this child might be. And, this child has the tendency, it looks like this child might be a doctor because he or she or they like to play with doctor sets and this and that. And we start ingraining these things. And it's just amazing how it happens. And I can just look back and I know that my parents and my grandparents and all the people who helped raise me, they meant well. But they marched me right down the same path onto the hamster wheel that so many of us are on or have been on.
Thank you. That it's very powerful, and for our younger listeners, it's difficult to see when you're inside, when you're in that box, and when you're looking at it. I guess everyone has that epiphany at some point in their life, except maybe for the ones lucky enough where they've been directed by their environment and all the other factors there actually dovetail into your purpose for life. But I suspect that's a lot more rare than we would expect it to be. Um, Tell us about inbound leaders. I think we have an idea of what it does, but maybe a little more in detail. And one of the things I found interesting on your website was the assessment that you do for inbound leaders. So, can you discuss those two things a little bit, how they relate to each other, how you use them business wise?
Sure. I'm glad you picked up on the assessment piece. So, what I found is many of us say that we're ready for, I'll call it happiness and contentment and things of that nature. But I've discovered that we really aren't. There are so many who are much more comfortable living in discomfort. I was one. So I'm not knocking it. I understand it. I know it all too well. But our business model does not work unless individuals have really made the decision and the commitment that they want to make a shift, because it's not the easiest thing to do. Once we start to come up from the iceberg sort of existence where we let the world see 10% of who we really are and submerge the rest because it doesn't fit or we're afraid or, um, once we make that commitment to say, okay, I'm okay with opening the kimono, I'm okay with coming out of the water, we're vulnerable. There are a lot of things about ourselves that we keep to ourselves or only to the people who are very close to us, that we're not willing to let the rest of the world see. But I tell you that you can't really live until you're willing to allow that to happen because it's too much to remember. There are too many boxes to continue to check. There are too many things to make sure that you're doing right or saying right or being right about. When in fact, I mean, and I refer to it as there is intimate transparency and then there's transparency. And I fully believe in transparency. Sure, there are some things that we need to, keep within our closest circles. But then we can't really live if I have to remember who it is that you expect me to be, who you think I am, who I should be. It's too much. And again, I start contorting. And once I start contorting, I start betraying myself. And that is something that I just won't do any longer. And so with inbound leadership, what I'm really focused on doing is helping other leaders make that same commitment. Because what we do when we lead organizations is we force people to contort. We tell people you need to be this way, you have to be that way. It's not psychologically safe. It's, you're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to be yourself. That's why people talk about having your work face, your family face, or your home life and your work life, when in fact we do so much of each, and we already know that they've converged, that the best thing for all of us is to find a way to be who we are as much as we are wherever we are at any given time. And that's my mission. And I start with the leaders because I think leaders are the ones who have the greatest impact often to help individuals and encourage individuals to do that. If they're willing to do it, then the people in their organizations or in their communities or wherever they're leading will feel more comfortable doing the same.
Your business is set up for coaching and developing leaders. Many of our listeners would just be individuals, college career, early career lifespan, don't see themselves as leaders. Maybe they're just a worker bee in the hive somewhere. They don't identify themselves as being a leader of a group or a manager or something along those lines. But what you have providing for leaders is as I look at your webpage, a perfect list of what a individual needs to incorporate into their life to be their true selves. So we're not dealing just with a businessman here. The principles that you have apply to every man.
Russell,
Is
that
that not
is,
correct?
yes, absolutely correct and very important point to make because, a leader, I believe everyone is a leader and it depends on where you are, what you're doing, however, but I'm hoping that our content resonates with everyone. So as I said, my mission is to target leaders, but that again is sort of a global mission to make sure that we're trying to touch as many people at once. But any individual, I'm hoping that visits our website or might read something that we post, an article or anything, is inspired to be their most authentic selves. There's only one Russell, there's only one Malitta. And if we compromise, the world misses out. And that's the thing that's so exciting about every individual trying to do their best to be who they are authentically, listening to the inner voice, the thing that tells you to go left when everyone else is saying go right, trusting that voice, knowing that you're going to be okay, knowing that you didn't come here to be like anyone else. You're not going to leave here being like anyone else. And finding joy in that, finding joy in being different. When I was growing up, I never felt like I fit into my own family, let alone the community that I was in. but I found myself constantly trying. I kept trying to be who I thought they expected to me to be, do what I thought they expected me to do. And, through the years, I just became so unhappy. And, at the age 50, I was asking, why am I so unhappy? Well, I had 50 years of creating it, I didn't mean to, but that's what I did when I began to ignore the inner voice. And so, for all the listeners who are not necessarily at the height of their careers or, think of themselves as being leaders, you are the leader of your life. You are absolutely the leader of your life. And so I encourage you to treat your life as though you are the leader, the one in command, the one that makes the decisions. And so I'm glad you brought that up because that's an important point.
Leader of your life. That's a great phrase. I remember in high school, pulling back from my own past, we were told at some point as upperclassmen that there's always someone looking up to you. If you're on a sport team, if you're in a school, if you're doing anything, there's someone looking up to you. So in some context, you are a leader. There is somebody looking at you, following after you in some manner or another. But even if not, even if it's just your own life, you still have to take the lead in your own life and take control and reach for that self and finding that self. Which brings me, I just want to make sure I'm following these in some kind of order. So let me look at my notes. I apologize for a brief, let me take a sip here and just relax for a second. I can't think as fast as I want to. I can't think and develop questions as quickly as I want to digest the information. But I'll edit all this fluff out when we get there. Let's talk about your book for a second, if you don't mind. Uh, I want you to give you a chance to promote your book as much as you'd like. But I want to ask specifically if you can do this without too much of a spoiler on the book about the prove it method, which I think might have some worth if we can just get a little picture onto the prove it method.
So it's really interesting how this came about. So I was at the height of pity and feeling very low and alone. And I was angry and I was, crying out to God, the universe, trying to make sense of everything that had happened to me or was happening to me. And I remember saying, I really just want to be happy. I don't need a complicated life. I don't need all the things, the extra things that I have in life. I just want to be happy. That's what I've been broken down to. And you have to remember this was after 20 years of working 7 days a week and accumulating things and trying to get to that, the place on the ladder that, I wanted to reach. And I was really just letting go. Like I want to be happy. And the words that I heard back were prove it. And it was an interesting moment. And as I started to journal, because I was a big journaler, I started to write down what was going on with me. And the prove it became from pain to presence, from resistance to release, from obstacles to observation, from victimhood to valor, from ego imbalance to ego consciousness, from inner peace, I'm sorry, from insecurity to inner peace, and from tip of the iceberg to top of the mountain. And it really created the chapters for the book. And that is the process I had to go through to get to the level of contentment that I'm happy that I reached. Because I had to get out of my pain and get present about who I am, what I really wanted, and what I was doing, how those things were misaligned, and, to understand what I was resisting. What I was resisting was letting go of the business that wasn't making me happy. And so I had to learn to release. And so I won't take you through all of the steps and things in the book, but that's really what the Prove It methodology is about. And for all of your listeners, what I found is with the people that I work with and everyone I speak to, Prove It is a methodology that can help you no matter where you are in life. Because it's really about the basics of just living true to yourself, and being reminded about the things that we have to do, the basic things we have to do to create happiness and contentment and better relationships and experiences in life. So that is how the proven methodology came about.
Wow. That's trying to get those in my head as you're going through them so quickly. I would definitely have to check out the material there. It's fantastic. I love the iceberg from to the mountaintop analogy as the final step there. It's great. Thank you for that. I have your website up here on my iPad. If we could, your first, maybe your mission statement or your description of inbound leadership at the top of your page, I found very powerful, very purposefully written, very pointedly written. I'd like to try something almost like free association, because I want to read this phrase by phrase. And for each phrase, I want to give you a second to, if you have something to expand on that, because like any great mission statement, there's a ton of information packed into every phrase. And every word here, as I read this, more so than many others, seems to me to be specifically chosen on a word to word basis to get the concept across that you want. So if you don't mind, can we do this little exercise using can we call this a mission statement? Okay, great. So this is from the inboundleadership.com website, and it's great leadership starts from within. Inbound leadership, the act of traveling inward.
So that is the beginning. So when we make the choice to really look at ourselves and to love ourselves and to go inside of ourselves, to listen specifically to the voice that we typically push out, the one that is telling us softly, not the loud chatter, the one that's panicky and worried, but the one that's calm, the one that's loving, the one that nudges us. When we're willing to go in and really listen and pay attention to that voice, that's where a lot of the answers are. And so we first have to make the commitment to go inside and to block out the external, and to give priority to what is going on and what is felt inside.
Small, still voice is a phrase that comes to mind, which I think applies a little bit differently, but still it can be applied to that as well. So the act of traveling inward, returning to a place of origin to gain a better understanding and awareness of the self. I probably should have broken that down into at least two or three pieces.
But this is my favorite part, and that is, Russell, who were you before the world really got a hold of you? Who were you as a child? What were your thoughts? What were your dreams? What made you feel good? What made you happy before, your friends told you it shouldn't make you happy? Or, it could be that, I love to, I don't know, wear funny hats, whatever might have been the case. But returning to what was originally you. Who was I originally, as far back as I can recall, and what were the things that made my heart flutter? What were the things that maybe I was shamed out of loving about myself, or taught that it was not good to go down a certain path? But rediscovering that person is really important, because it's hard for us to reach a place of contentment and authenticity if we don't go back and recapture who we once were.
And reemerging with more authenticity. Almost self explanatory, but go ahead.
But it's once we tap into that, can we love that? Can we honor it? Can we come out and say, it doesn't matter to me if this makes you comfortable or not, whether you like it or not? This makes me happy. This makes me feel like myself. And when I reemerge, I have a commitment to honoring that self. So when I do encounter something in opposition to what I desire or what I believe, that I have a certain strength and a resolve within me, and an understanding that I need to love this self to express this self. Doesn't mean that I won't compromise at times, but I won't contort the self that I am, because then I'll miss out on Melita, and I don't want to do that.
Wow. Uh, a journey of excavation, and I'm specifically why the word excavation to eliminate blind spots and barriers.
Because we have to be willing to dig it up. You know, I mean, I often see, and I would do it as well. Want to get past something. You know what? I know that exists in me, but you know what? I'm going to just ignore it. I just won't do it anymore. Well, guess what? The only way for me not to be or to do something anymore is to get rid of it. So I have to understand it. I have to be willing to go in and ask myself, why did I compromise in the first place? What is it about me? You know, I discovered that I had lower self esteem than I needed to have. And so often I would overcompensate, I would compromise, I would, not be sure of myself. And so I would go along with what maybe others are saying is better, or what was more popular, or what had been done before. But once I went in to really excavate what was inside of me, what's missing, or what was put in me, what was I told about myself? What was I believing about myself that maybe isn't true, or at least I need to explore and get rid of. But that allows me, excavating allows us to come out more authentically and say, this is who I am. I've gotten rid of all of this other stuff, or I've taken a look at all of this other stuff and uncovered what what caused me to betray myself, or what caused me to not fully live as myself. And now that I have gotten rid of that, I'm ready to live. I want to live now as myself, authentically as myself. And it's not a perfect science, but it certainly is better than trying to gloss over, go around, work around, and pretend that something is not there. I tell a story in the book that I won't totally give away, but it was from my childhood, um, where I realized that it was the first experience where I felt insignificant. My parents didn't mean to. It was something that took place between my siblings and I, but it was the first time I was told, without being told directly, you're not as significant. And that carried with me, and I could associate that with so many other experiences after that. And I never thought about it. It was in my subconscious. So that's why
Wow.
excavation to me is extremely important.
It's an indication that it's a lot more work than other self-help or coaching individuals, even mentors might tell you. They might say you need to just eliminate blind spots. You find the barriers and overcome them, but there are times where excavation is more along it indicates the amount of work that needs to be done to do those things. Very fascinating. And then the final phrase, to reboot mindsets for better joy and success. That's what we all want, whether we can all find a way to get there or not. But a reboot of mindset, you address, and I have that as a separate note later on down the website where it talks about awareness, engagement, and practice. I believe that ties into the reboot mindsets for better joy and success. Can you go a little deeper into that?
So, what happens if we don't reboot? We find ourselves falling back into old patterns, old thoughts, old behaviors. And so I love the word reboot because it is a restart. I get to start clean. And I tell people all the time, this is who you know me to be today. Tomorrow, I might wake up a completely new person, because I might have a new insight. I might have a new inspiration. And we have to be willing to reboot time and again, because that's what life is meant to be. I mean, to me, that's where the well of joy is, when you're willing to start all over again. When you're willing to erase what has been, had been. The past is full of things that we can regret, that we can be ashamed of, that we can be unsure about. But when we reboot, we wipe the slate clean. I don't want to think about that anymore. Thinking about that is only going to impact my tomorrow, and I don't want to do that. So I encourage people to reboot. Don't just fix it, don't just excavate, but reboot. Let it be gone. It's done.
And it is a conscious decision. I don't want to think about that anymore. So I'm going to take the effective action to make that a reality. It's difficult to do, though, is it not?
It is. It can be. I'll say that it can be. But
Fair.
once, I decide that Melita the old doesn't exist anymore. You can look at her past all you want, but it has very little to do with who I am today. I mean, the most that it has to do with who I am today are the lessons that I learned, and I value those, and I value the Melita that I was. Um, but my hope, my contentment, my joy is in who I am today. And the people that I am around, I simply ask, don't hold me to who you thought I was or who you knew me to be. Hold me as I am, as you're seeing me right now, as you see me today. Because if I'm living, I am living anew every day.
I'm going to go back to excavate a little bit because you alluded to a incident in your childhood. I'm not asking you to expand on that. From that point of view, I want to take the opposite point of view. How do we? I mean, my kids are grown, so for the younger parents, this my listening audience might have children or will soon have children. What what advice can you give to avoid that misdirection for children? The story you shared was certainly not meant to make you feel insignificant. And I've done that myself with my own children, of course. A phrase that comes out, something off the top of your head that you find out years later really devastated or really had an impact that was unintended. So, from the other side of things, what should we be looking for as a family leader to avoid doing those things to or with our children, depending on how you want to see it?
So it's very interesting that you asked that question. My children are grown as well, and I was on the phone with my oldest son, who has a 2 year old, soon to be three, and she's a handful. And so we were talking about her, and he was expressing, his concern. Am I parenting her right? And and I told him that the best thing that he can do for her is to really be present. And it sounds you know that doesn't sound very concrete, but what I'm saying to him and what I said to him is, when she's speaking to you, stop and really listen,
Oh, wow.
and be present.
That seems like, I'm sorry to interrupt you. It seems like such a small thing, but that is so important.
And
Just stop.
just stop. And today
Yes.
it's really hard. We have our phones in our hands, and they're just little ones, they don't understand. But when you stop and you look into their eyes and you really listen
Mm.
and you connect, and it can take just 30 seconds, 60 seconds, but it means the world to them. And so I would encourage everyone, even for us as adults, adult to adults, partner to partner, if we can just stop and really listen and be present, and just let the other person know, you matter to me. I hear you. I see you. I understand. Okay, you really want this doll right now. Let me stop and understand why. You want me to play pretend right now. Let me pause for a minute. And it's making the decision that I am going to try and be as present as I can, as often as I can. It's not a perfect science, again, but trying as much as we can to be present in this fast paced, crazy world we're in right now, that's grabbing our attention every minute it can get. When the priority really is with the people that we share our most intimate moments with.
Wow. Thank you for that. That's very good. We've covered so much. Uh, I found interesting you were talking earlier about living an uncomfortable existence, but we also know from books we've read and personal development that change doesn't come while you're in your comfort zone. So there's almost a dichotomy here of people see their comfort zone as living an uncomfortable life. They'll want to make a change because they don't want to be uncomfortable, but they're uncomfortable day to day in who they are. you address that within your work. I can see that just on the initial web page with things like the awareness, engagement, practice approach to mindfulness. I'd be interested in hearing just a further expansion on that. How do you overcome the inertia of living an uncomfortable life by becoming more uncomfortable? And in the balance, which I know the answer to this, I think I do. Which one is worse?
So
Which one presents more discomfort?
I had become an expert at that. I convinced myself that the discomfort I was living in was not only something that I needed to do, but I had to do long after I did not have to do it. And unfortunately for me, I stayed there until my situation became a crisis. And I would encourage everyone listening to begin to make changes, small changes, as you're listening to the inner voice, as you're listening to your intuition, your gut about things that feel right and the things that don't, until the things that don't feel right create a problem. Because eventually, you run into a collision. There's the collision of what's inside and the collision of what's happening outside. And if it's no more than being angry with your partner or being angry with your boss, discontent in your job, it just continues to grow. And so what I encourage individuals to do is not to ignore it. You don't have to make a
Mm.
change overnight, um, but ignoring it can create a crisis that can create pain, that can create suffering. And what you want to do is to avoid the suffering. Or avoid the turbulence or avoid the tsunami that can come because you did not follow what was really inside. The thing that maybe even sometimes it's saying something that you're uncomfortable saying. It could be to your boss, to your partner, a coworker, anyone. But you avoid saying it. And so the situation grows into a problem. And the problem grows into a crisis. And the crisis grows into turbulence. When in fact, if we sometimes address the smaller things as they're happening, we can avoid the bigger things that we don't want to happen. So that,
It's
that's
an
kind of living in the staying in your comfort zone when you're uncomfortable.
it's an internal butterfly effect, is it almost for the way you say it? I never really heard it implemented that way, but you have a small thing, a recurring instance of, like as you say, just being frustrated at work or with a partner, and by just ignoring that, repressing it, suppressing it, whatever the case might be, it becomes a return on investment that's very, very bad and momentous. The magnitude of it is so much greater than the initial cause.
So I,
So
I
that
I have a small, really small example. It's funny that everyone has a way of doing dishes, right? We have our own system or whatever. So my husband will stack dishes up and he likes to do them in the morning. I'm a person, I like dishes done right away. But even if they're not done, I like to soak them because I want to make sure there's nothing that's going to stick to the dishes that maybe won't come off in the dishwasher. So we had this discussion yesterday because he continues to stack the dishes up and I just couldn't take it anymore. I'm like, why do you continue to do this? Can you just at least soak the dishes and then get to them in the morning? But once upon a time, and that's a small example, once upon a time, I think I would not have said anything and it would just have continued to annoy me. And so not only would the dishes annoy me, but the other little thing that he does would annoy me on top of the dishes, which would annoy on top of the other thing. And guess what would happen? We'd have an unnecessary argument about something that was not even important because I
right.
allowed some things to build up inside that didn't need to build up.
And would you say the ability to recognize that, to me, it all seems to come around to just being present. Again, that small, still voice, even if it's about a negative thing, it's still taking the time. You want to give those 30 seconds to your child when they need it, but you also need to give those 30 seconds to yourself to identify those things as they happen.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And we talk in the book about observation, how important it is to look at yourself and observe yourself, not just the people around you, but it's taking a look. And the analogy that Brad uses is watching yourself on a roller coaster. If you hate roller coasters and you watch yourself, going up the hill and you're anxious and you're afraid, and then you just start screaming and you're on the ground watching yourself saying, "Why are you screaming and anxious?" The ride's going to be over in about 60 seconds. This is unnecessary. So, but being present and observing, absolutely.
Wow, I like that. I like that. Expand for me a little bit if you may have covered it and I missed it, but you use the phrase intimate transparency as opposed to maybe is that a further extension of day-to-day transparency? Is it something that would apply maybe between me and my wife and not between me and a business partner? Is there more to it than that?
Yes. So when we talk about authenticity and transparency, often individuals feel like, well, I don't want to share that much. Well, there are some things that are honored as partner to partner, husband and wife, inside your household. That's what makes you a unit, because you share things on a level that really should not be shared with others. You help each other, you're growing together, you're nurturing each other on a much more intimate level. But that does not mean that isn't still a need for you to be transparent and authentic in the world. And I think what happens is people often shut it off. You're transparent at home, but I can't afford to do that in the outside world. And what we encourage individuals to do is to find that zone of transparency that allows your authenticity to carry from your home into the external. It doesn't mean that everything gets transferred. I don't need to go to my colleagues and tell them everything that happens with between Brad and me, but I do need to be authentically Melita whenever I am in their presence. And I think the way that the world has gotten us is almost as a shut off. I have a right not to really fully be myself here because, that's the external world. Well, no, absolutely. You should be Russell in the external world. If you're not, we're going to miss you. We won't get to know you. We won't understand you. We won't get to see your beauty. We won't know everything that's authentically you. And so our goal through inbound leadership is to help leaders understand that the more authentic you are, the more of an individual that you are, the more you'll connect with people, the more you can do for your community, the more you can do for the world. So, it's extremely important, in my opinion, that we find that middle piece that's missing. It just seems to be missing to me, in society, and it's become almost a norm, so to speak. It's a norm for me not to really know who you are, because this is our work interaction. That's different, and I don't believe in that.
It's almost like the difference what we present on social media versus what we really are. I have my work personality, I have my social media personality, I have my at home personality. Those all need to be more authentic. Yes. Very good, very good. If a leader looking to work with you or have you work with them to develop them, you have the assessment and you closely evaluate possible clients before you work with them, it seems, from what you have on your website. If someone wants to work with you, what would they expect? Are these individual workshops? Do you do group meetings? Do you have on-site things? Is it all remote? Just business-wise, how does your coaching and mentorship go?
Thank you for asking that. So, there are three primary areas that we focus on. One, we're launching a series of retreats, offsite retreats in 2026. Those will be announced, but we're taking a handful of CEOs in an immersive kind of environment, and taking them through some experiences that we are hoping will impact their ability to be more vulnerable, more authentic, and more self-aware, because that's what's critical. So that's one area. The other is that we do offer workshops for teams. So we go into organizations and we help teams learn how to communicate and be more authentic and collaborative and self-aware. Because what
Oh,
happens is we spend a lot of time with the people we work with, but again, just as we were just discussing, we don't always know each other. We don't really understand that Sue is really an introvert, and but she's this fun-loving person who really loves to cook. She's a foodie, whatever. But it's not just knowing other people's interests; is really understanding who they are um, inside. What makes them happy, what makes them joyful, what annoys them. And then helping these teams come together to work better together, understanding what the goals are. So we do those workshops, and we do some one-on-one coaching. That again really comes down to working with individuals who want to go deep within to excavate, is what I'll say, excavate what's inside, and really willing almost to face whether or not they're in the right seat. I mean, that's where you really start. Is this a good seat for me? Sure, I want these things. This is what I want. This is what I aspire to. But is this seat really making me happy? Because there are three things that we define as success, right? It is wealth, health, and joy. And what we do, though, is we break it down and ask people to please reverse that. It's really joy, health, and wealth. If you don't have joy, you don't have success. If you don't have joy and health, your success is compromised, and wealth is icing on the cake. Because if you have joy and you have health, you've already hit the mark. So that's really what we focus on.
the teen approach sounds fantastic. Where have you found all this you talk like a professional counselor that's been through the work and has done all the academia and the research. But if you worked as a business person for 20 years and now you've developed this, are these all lessons that you've developed on your own? Have you had schooling
This is
in the
interesting.
in
It's a great question. So Brad and I laugh about this because we call it the school of life. We, we literally, sure, I've taken, Harvard executive courses. I've done all of that, and but nothing compares to living through it. And Brad and I have dedicated the last 7 years of our lives to really honing in on what has been really important. What are the lessons we've really learned? And what we have to offer the world is to open ourselves up and to be very transparent. We're very transparent in the book about our failures, our successes, the things that are still open that we have not resolved. And I believe that if more of us do that in life, no offense to academia, but a lot of it becomes unnecessary. Once we begin to share our life stories without trying to box them or make them put a ribbon on them and make them pretty or make them palatable to other people, then we can then learn from one another. It's how life started. It's how we got here. There were no universities and institutions once upon a time. There was the lesson of life and passing on those lessons. So we have, done the traditional route, but we learned a lot more on our non-traditional path.
I'm very impressed. I'm really looking forward to learning more about the organization and the approach. Uh, we have just a few minutes left, and I have two questions left, and I'm going to present them in reverse order. So I'm going to have you maybe just an earwig to think about the final question, which is, what have I not asked that I should have asked? Maybe a last piece of information, a last piece of motivation that you can give our listeners as a closing word. But before that, and these can dovetail into each other if they need to, you mentioned that you journal quite a bit and you have journaled for some time. What other habits that we might read in Stephen Covey's book or other places about, these are common for successful people or for self-actualized people? Do you have other habits? Do you meditate? Do you read? Do you avoid television? Do you pay attention to the news? Do you avoid the news? Just generally, what are some personal things that that we can try to incorporate into our own lives to try and reach a level of awareness that we should have?
Sure. So we talked earlier about excavating and rebooting. So a practice that I don't compromise on is every morning when I get up, I created a quiet room for myself. It's a room that used to be full of junk that I cleared, and it's my space to start my day because I have to center myself through meditation and calm to remind myself who I am, who I choose to be, what I choose to achieve in that one day. I can't think about the next 10 days. I can't think about too much yesterday, but I can center myself for the present day because I know once I leave my quiet room, the world is waiting for me. And I have to be rooted in myself and committed to myself and journal with myself about what that day means to me because every day is precious. And you mentioned that you have younger listeners, and that's I am so happy for them because they might have 300 summers left. I start counting my summers. And it's like, you know what? I have a limited number of summers left. So every day matters to me. And so I want to spend every day wisely. And I just encourage every listener to do the same. And at the end of the day, I find that I am much happier and much more content with how I spent my day. And I know the days I've missed a couple of days, and I tell you, it's a catastrophe because I'm all over the place. Everyone has a piece of my mind. Everyone has a piece of my soul. But when I start my day centered with a knowing of who I choose to be, I am I'm destined for a good day or a better day.
Great, great. That comes up more commonly than I would expect in my interviews. That moment of, well, more than a moment, but that time of introspection and calm and recognition. Let me interject before we get to our very last question. If you have a final thought, I wanted to mention if your son was asking about whether he was being a good parent, I found in my history that that's almost always an indication that that person is being a good parent or whatever the situation is. If someone is concerned enough to ask, am I doing this correctly? What can I do better? They're not perfect, but they're working on it, and they're probably doing a good job at that.
I will definitely share that with him.
Fantastic. Uh, well, we look forward to the book coming out. I hope you have good success with that. If you're interested in an audiobook, we can hook you up with a great audiobook narrator that I know. But we'll see. That's a different topic altogether. So share with us a final thought, if you would, and we'll close it out and contemplate these things through the rest of the day.
Sounds good. So thank you. This has been great. I've enjoyed this. The one thing that I would leave with you is Mindset Freedom was written to encourage and support individuals in finding that place of peace. Life can be very challenging, very demanding, especially in these times, have us kind of split and divided in so many ways. And what we really want, most of us, is really just a sense of peace and belonging. We think often that that's going to come via wealth, it's going to come via certain levels of success, but it comes from the inside. The external can create happy moments, but happiness comes from the inside. That's where it's created. That's where it's interpreted. And so Mindset Freedom is really designed to help us tap into that well of happiness, that place that we can create from. And that's why it's called Mindset Freedom. When we release ourselves from these imaginary jails, they're imaginary mind jails that we put ourselves in, that create boxes that have us living lives that we're not necessarily happy with. So we're hoping that through the journey, taking our journey with us through the book, that others will be encouraged and supported in finding their own happiness and peace.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Malitta Seamon's inboundleadership.com and the upcoming book, Mindset Freedom. Did I say all that correctly?
Yes, you did. Thank you so much. Thank you for
Fantastic.
having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
This has been a pleasure. Thank
been-
you.
Been my privilege. Thank you.
Bye.